Hey guys, I'm Sage Valentine and I'm back here to review another episode of AMC's The Walking Dead, Season 7, Episode 7, Sing Me a Song. So let's just get down to it. There is a lot to break down in so little time. Are you guys ready? Here goes. Michonne. She had some of the best scenes in this episode. I am so happy that the writers have brought her back to her badass self because so many people have been talking on social media and saying, you know what, now that she's Rick's girlfriend, she's going to take on Andrea's storyline and she's going to be pushed to the background. And I'm like, I don't know if we both read the same comic books, but despite the fact that Andrea was Rick's girlfriend, Andrea went off and did her own thing, especially during All Out War. And she also went off and did something during the Whisper War that's going on right now. She did something in the beginning. I forgot. She was out there by herself. She had like this hat on and this blanket on, if I remember correctly. Okay. So Michonne definitely showed that she's truly badass. Michonne came up with this idea to create this walker roadblock. And she lured the walkers by whistling The Farmer in the Dell. It reminded me so much of Omar Little from HBO's The Wire. If you have not watched that show, definitely watch it. 3 of the actors from that show have appeared and are still on The Walking Dead. Carl really shined during this episode, and I'm so happy because I heard rumors all summer that Daryl was going to take on his storyline, and I like Daryl. As you can see, I have Daryl t-shirt, 1, 2, 3, 4 Daryl t-shirts, but still, like, I wanted Carl to have this storyline. I wanted him to have his moment with Negan. And I was just overwhelmed with the way that that moment was taken from the comics and was remixed. Loved it. I liked how Carl basically outsmarted Jesus because he had Jesus thinking that he was too afraid to jump from that truck, I guess because of the fact that he had one eye. So when Jesus jumped from that truck, Carl stayed behind and waved like, bye, Jesus, I'm not going anywhere. And then when Carl and the truck arrived at the sanctuary, which on a side note looked exactly the way that it does in the comics, kudos to Walking Dead. When Carl popped out in the truck after shooting those 2 saviors, and then he was looking for Negan, all I could think of was his comic book counterpart, despite the fact that when Carl did it in the comics, he was a little bit smaller. Still badass though. And Negan pops up and he's just like, oh, aren't you adorable? But at the same time, while he's talking to Carl, he pulls over this dude with this ponytail and he's using that guy as a human shield. And Carl jumps down and then is disarmed by Dwight. And I feel like on a side note, if Carl had still had his other eye, Dwight would have had a run for his money. But I digress. So basically, with Carl, he's on the ground and Negan's offering to give him a hand. And Carl's looking at him like, I'm not going to let you help me. Like, I don't trust you. And it's not until Daryl is threatened that Carl decides to allow Negan to help him up. And speaking of Negan, Negan is just at his highest point of being extra in this entire episode. Once again, Jeffrey Dean Morgan outdid himself, and I, again, hope that he wins that Critics' Choice Award because he is killing this role. He seems to be having a marvelous time, honestly. Negan mentions that he won't have time to screw any of his wives except for one, and looks at Dwight, meaning that he'll have time to sleep with Sherry. And Negan sees Carl as a badass and basically tells Carl in this episode, don't ruin my interpretation of you by coming across as being scared. Because remember, Carl asked Negan, like, what are you going to do with me? And Negan's just looking at him like, why did you even say that? You're just going to ruin the way I'm looking at you. Negan brings Carl with him as he addresses the people, and he says something about how the people in the sanctuary have to work hard and play by the rules. That's where the point system comes in. So when Negan says, you guys are all getting fresh vegetables, No points. You don't have to work for points. You just get this fresh. These people are excited. Some people on social media were like, who the hell cares about vegetables? I'm like, dude, when was the last time, I'm assuming, these people have eaten something that didn't come out of a can? On top of the fact that if something was fresh and popped up in the sanctuary, these people would have to work hard to get it. So this is a freebie for the day. And I do think these vegetables are the ones that came from the kingdom. And Negan does all of this in front of Carl to try to show Carl that he is this powerful. And this is the type of power that he has. Rosita and Eugene are on their way out. And Eugene wants to go with Spencer and Gabriel, but Rosita's like, no, because she wants Eugene to make her the bullet that he promised he would make her. Spencer thinks that it would be a better idea to give the saviors the supplies because it's like paying taxes. And he really honestly looks like a jackass when he says this, to be honest. So Negan brings Carl to meet his wives. And in the comic book, Negan made a really vulgar comment about the Alexandrian women dressing like quote-unquote lesbians. So I'm glad that they changed that and made it the line that he said, the women where you're from, and I'm probably paraphrasing this, look like they do the books at an auto shop or a car shop or something like that. All the wives in this place, in this little room, this beautiful room, are all dressed in black, but in the comic book they have on bras, panties, garter belts, and fishnet thigh highs and heels. Now, Negan asked Sherry about Amber and Mark because this dude, if you don't already know, knows everything that's going on in the sanctuary. You're probably saying to yourself, how the hell does he know this? Because these people in this place are so loyal to him that if they see something that shouldn't be happening, they run and tell him. But Negan talks to Sherry, and he reveals that he heard that Mark, Amber's husband, skipped out on his job to be with Amber, which is a big no-no, a huge no-no. Sherry tries to protect Amber and says, go easy on her. And in the comic book, Negan was like, when have I ever lifted a hand at any of you women here? Calm down. Now, when Negan addresses Amber, he tells her, listen, you don't have to stay if you don't want to. I don't want anybody here that doesn't want to be here. But the one thing you can't do is you can't cheat on me. That's something that all the wives know. Every single one of them. So Negan asks her, do you want to stay or do you want to go back and work for points? Because I can think of a job for you. I can put you, your mother, and Mark on the same detail. She decides she wants to stay, knowing full and well that Mark will get the iron to his face. That's the name of the dude who got his face burned. But in the comic books, Negan tells Amber that she could trade her life for his, which, hearing this coming out of my mouth, you would think that Negan's saying that he would kill Amber and spare Mark. No, no, no. He's telling Amber, listen, if you don't want Mark to go through this, getting his face burned, then, you know, you could, I assume, go through that for him. And Amber says no. So Negan sends Sherry to go get Dr. Carson, because I guess they have the doctor on hand once Negan burns whomever's face. And all of a sudden, Sherry and Negan kiss. Now, for all of those who say that Sherry is being forced to be a wife because of the backstory that was created for the show, you should have noticed how she kissed Negan and she held his face. So if she didn't care about Negan, she would have just let him kiss her and go on about her business. And that kiss was very, very passionate. And I am glad that that was added to the scene because it doesn't happen in the comic book. So that people can see that Sherry is no angel. Don't think she's an angel because she's not. So Dwight witnesses this. So this is a part of Dwight's storyline that will surprise the hell out of a whole bunch of people, because a lot of people hate him now, but eventually you're going to change your mind about him. Just wait. So Negan makes Carl carry around this tray of food for him, like cheese and something else on it. So Daryl is up there with Dwight, and he comes out after not talking for how long and asks Negan, why is he here? And Negan's all surprised, like, dude, you can speak? And just to be cruel, Negan asked Dwight to fire up that furnace. And we all know that that is probably extremely traumatizing for poor Dwight, because don't forget, half his face is burned, so at one point he definitely dealt with that. That scene with Spencer and Father Gabriel was fantastic. I was so happy when Father Gabriel told Spencer off and then got out of that car, especially after Spencer said that it would be a good thing if Rick did not return from that scavenge that he's on with Aaron. And you know that a character must be pretty bad for someone like Father Gabriel to be like, F this, I'm out. I'm getting out of this car because I can't listen to this dude speak again. I am no longer upset with Rick. Rick and I are cool, and I'm not going to sit up here and let you talk about Rick like that. So Negan shows us his master bedroom, which is gorgeous. From the couches to that canopy bed to the drapes, the color scheme, everything about it was awesome. And I, like most people, was stupid enough to believe that that little room with the yellow chair was Negan's. I was like, stupid. You read the comic, like you should have known. That little room was not Negan's. In actuality, that was the room that Negan was going to give Daryl. I figured that one out later. So Negan's talking to Carl, and Carl asks him, all those women, those are your wives? And Negan was like, yeah. He was like, why follow old rules? Why settle for one woman when you can screw a whole bunch? Why not make life better? Like typical Negan answer. So Negan decides he wants to get to know Carl. And he respects the fact that Carl is on a mission and he's not like normal teens all upset because they can't go to the prom and stuff like that. Then we get to the scene that happens in the comics where Negan makes Carl take off his bandage, which is really traumatic for Carl because Carl feels some type of way already about the fact that he no longer has his eye, so everything is harder for him to do now. And in doing this, removing that bandage, it makes Carl cry. And then Negan feels bad for making Carl cry. Some people online were like, Negan doesn't really feel bad about making Carl cry. I think he genuinely does in that scene, because that's one of the few times you see the whole bravado thing kind of come down, and he's like, man, you know, it's hard for me to remember that you are only just a child. So here comes Fat Joey, and he brings in little Lucille, because apparently Negan left Lucille by the truck after that whole, or because of that whole situation with Carl. And that situation, on a side note, that scene was too funny, because Negan is like making this joke with Fat Joey, and he's asking Joey, did you take care of her? Did you pet her private parts nicely? And he's like, hold up. He's like, a bat doesn't have private parts. And then he's like laughing with Joey, and Joey's making himself laugh, and then Negan just tells him, get out. And I'm just cracking up in that whole scene, because Negan to me is too funny this season. And by too funny, I mean the stuff that he says, not the whole killing people part, no. So what you need to know about this exchange between Carl and Negan is that it's going to lead to Carl becoming more independent and becoming defiant again. Wait until you see how the writers bring that part of the storyline to life, because I did think that was interesting in the comic books, but I can't wait for everybody else who didn't read the comics to see that. So Negan makes Carl sing him a song, and he has him sing a song that Laurie used to sing to him. And while he does it, Negan is swinging Lucille, which is pretty traumatic considering what happened in the first episode of the season. So I felt so sorry for Carl because he was traumatized. Poor baby. So Negan asks about Carl's mom, and Carl kind of reveals that, as we know, Lori died, and he was the one that had to shoot Lori and put her down. So then we get to Iron Time. That's how I put it in the notes. A lot of people were traumatized by that scene. I know a family friend who was very traumatized by that scene. Me, I was just like, it's about time they show this scene, because I was ready to see it. Because it was crazy enough in the comics. I had prepared myself. I prepared everybody around me, like, that whole iron scene is coming. It's definitely coming. So Negan has Carl hold Lucille, and he warned everyone that was watching. And on a side note, after watching that scene again, I realized that the people who were watching didn't even flinch. Didn't even get upset. They just stood there watching like, sucks for him as long as it's not me. So basically we learned that anyone who breaks the rules, no matter what, gets the iron. Well, anyone except for the wives. Keep that in mind. And Mark is unfortunately the unlucky chap to get the iron to the face. Negan does it without warning, just presses it right to the dude's face. It looks so real. It was gross. I'm good. I'm good. And like I said, the other savior seemed completely unbothered. And the poor guy peed himself, and Negan made a joke about that. And Daryl is the unlucky person to have to clean up that puddle of urine. While Dr. Carson, I assume, has to patch this poor dude up because he completely passed out. Mark's scar is supposed to remind him, as well as everyone else, about the repercussions of breaking the rules, something that Dwight had to learn the hard way. So Spencer, after Father Gabriel left the car and was walking back, he ran off into the woods. He found a list in the pocket of this walker that was hanging up on this thing, and I was sitting down wondering, how the heck did that walker get up there? Did Spencer hoist him up there? Like, what's going on with that situation? If anybody knows that, definitely leave me a comment down below. And the list looked like it was either in Latin or in some other dead language, but I'm glad that I was right after watching Talking Dead and they said that it was in Latin. Rosita made Eugene make her that bullet. And Eugene said he feels iffy about doing it because, you know, if by chance she misses and hits somebody else, then someone else is going to have to pay the price for what Rosita did. And more than likely, it's not going to be her. And the reason why he said that is because Negan has taken a liking to Rosita. And then Rosita decides to insult him, and basically Eugene ends up making the bullet as he was basically crying, because I feel so sorry for him. I really do. I was not a Eugene fan until the most recent season, I think season 6, and I started to like Eugene more. I felt so bad for him in that scene. Recently, in reading one of the most recent issues that was released, I learned the truth about Sherry, which is why I am completely side-eyeing that character. Now, initially when I first met the character while reading the comics, it was said that she became a wife to elevate herself and Dwight, because by sleeping with Negan, she was given all the best stuff, Dwight was given all the best stuff, the best food, the best clothes, etc. And that was something that happened to all of the wives. Their husbands, I guess their family members, all got the best stuff because they were adjacent to said wife. However, after reading the comics, something new was revealed, and it definitely changed my mind about Sherry. That's why I don't like her. And in the most recent comic, she reveals herself to be something else. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to ruin that part. But her characterization in the TV show bothers me because it goes on to further this discussion that people have been having that Negan is a rapist. And that this whole deal that he has with this woman, or these women, is non-consensual. And this whole conversation keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. But what you all need to know is that if you got to rewatch the episode, rewatch the episode. None of those wives in that room are afraid of Negan. Amber is afraid to tell Negan what she did with Mark because she knows that Mark is going to get his face burned. But you have to remember, Amber knew this when she and Mark kind of sort of hooked up. She knew this, and he knew this. So in a way, this is karma. As cruel as it is to say it, it's karma. My thing with Sherry is that on the TV show, Sherry became a wife just because she wanted to save Dwight's life and her own life. But like I said, in the comic books, it's all about her station and his station and what's going on right now in the comics. That's going to make you go like, oh my God. On top of the fact that you can see some of what I was discussing from the comics in the characterization of Sherry on the TV show, especially in that scene when Dwight and Sherry are talking just to get back on track. And Sherry seems completely unbothered by what happened to Mark. And she completely seems unbothered by having to tell on Amber. And she gives Dwight the cold shoulder despite the fact that Dwight was not trying to holler at her and he was not trying to have sex with her. But she kind of turned away from him and said, yeah, nothing's happening right now. Carl asks Negan how come he hasn't killed him or Daryl or Rick, and Negan reveals that Daryl will make a good soldier. Rick gives him good stuff, but as far as Carl is concerned, Negan can't figure out what he should do with Carl, and Carl says during this scene to Negan, if you knew us, you would kill us, but you can't kill us because, as we learned, Negan needs them. Now, Negan decides to take Carl back to Alexandria. And somehow, someway, Jesus jumped on top of Negan's truck. But when they show that scene again, I'm trying to figure out, where did Jesus end up? Did he somehow jump onto another truck? Like, where is he? But Jesus is a ninja, so it is what it is. And in the comic books, he does a lot of stealthy stuff just like that. So before Negan leaves, Daryl threatens Negan and threatens to do something to him if he hurts Carl. And Negan's just like, Dwight, Daryl needs a timeout. And I'm cracking up during that scene. So someone left Daryl a note while he was locked up. And they tell him to get out while he can. And they give him a match and a key. And at first I thought it was Sherry. But now I'm starting to realize that that was more than likely Dwight. So Negan and Carl come to Olivia's house. Poor Olivia. Oh man, as soon as she sees Negan, she's so traumatized. Negan says he's looking for Rick and he makes her cry with one of his jokes because he starts talking about her weight, and I'm just shaking my head, but that scene does happen in the comics, just so you know. Then he apologizes, which is rare, and proceeds to go on and tell Olivia that he would like to screw her brains out, and she slapped him, and I was cracking up. And when I watched The Talking Dead, I found out that when they filmed that scene, they only did one take. So that reaction that Jeffrey Dean Morgan has in the scene is his real reaction. So Negan wants lemonade, so Olivia goes out to get him powdered lemonade, which I think is country time because I used to drink that when I was younger, when I used to drink like that processed lemonade, but now I drink the stuff that's like more natural. It's a whole health food kick that I'm doing on the side note. But anyway, Carl takes Negan on a tour of Alexandria, and that whole scene was too funny. I like the music that was playing in the background, and Negan gets to feel the carpeting on his feet. He sees the running water coming out of the pipes, and he plays darts, and he hits the target, and then he meets little Judith. I'm sorry, a lot of people were scared. I thought that scene was so cute, despite the fact that the baby playing Judith just seemed completely unimpressed with Negan, but Negan called her a little angel. So Rick and Aaron went on their supply run, they come to this big sign that basically says, if you're able to read this sign, then I must be dead. And I believe, on a side note, that the property owner is, or was, or is that walker that Spencer had to kind of pull down from the tree to get the list out of his pocket. And Rick and Aaron come across this property that has food and supplies, but you have to cross it by boat, and there's nothing but walkers floating in this water. And I saw that scene that they showed at the end of Talking Dead, and that boat has bullet holes in it. God only knows how they are going to cross the water. Now, Eugene is highly upset with Rosita, which is understandable. And he doesn't want to chat, especially after what she said to him, because it was really cruel. Spencer pops up with a ton of canned food, and he reveals that it's from a dead guy who had a plan written in Latin, and he also has medical supplies and flares. So Spencer says that he's going to do more than just give up the supplies to Negan. In other words, Spencer is about to stage a coup. Wait till you see how that turns out. That's all I'm going to say. Now, Rosita, Eugene, and Spencer find out that Negan is at Alexandria because they honk the horn of one of the cars. And someone opens up the gate, and they picked probably the scariest looking man to do it. That man is so scary looking. He's probably the nicest person in the world, but he's so scary looking. Then we see Negan holding little Judith, and the way that he's holding her is so cute. Like, she's sleeping on his chest. Then he has to kind of like lift her up, and it looks like he kind of doesn't want to, but he has to, you know, for the scene. It's really sweet. And he says, you know, he might have to stay here. Maybe he should bury both Carl and Rick and settle in the suburbs. Alright guys, that's about it. I can't wait to watch tonight's mid-season finale. And now that Negan has shaved his face, you ain't seen nothing yet. So for all of you who said that Negan was annoying and Negan was extra and Negan's not scary, he's going to bring the scary in tonight's episode. That's all I'm going to say. And I'll be back to review the mid-season finale. I love you all. Take care. Bye guys. Bye.